Every morning, the moment you open your eyes, a battle is quietly taking place in your mind. It is not against the world, not against anyone else, but against the patterns you have allowed to take root within yourself. These patterns, your thoughts, your beliefs, your expectations, are the silent architects of your day. What you tell yourself, even before you rise from bed, begins to construct the reality you will inhabit for the next 24 hours. A simple thought can expand like a ripple across a pond, shaping every interaction, every decision, every emotion. Consider for a moment how often you wake up and the first thing that crosses your mind is a worry, a complaint, or a fear. Perhaps it is about work, about money, about relationships, about your own abilities. It is easy to dismiss these fleeting notions as unimportant, but they are not. The mind has a way of listening to what you speak to it first. If you greet your morning with doubt, your mind will seek to confirm it. If you greet it with criticism, your mind will find examples to support your self-reproach. In these early moments, you are planting seeds. The seeds you plant in thought are what you will harvest in experience. Now, imagine a different scenario. You wake up and tell yourself, I am capable. I am enough. Today, I will meet challenges with clarity and calm. You may not fully feel these words at first, but your mind begins to notice them. It begins to orient itself toward possibility rather than limitation. It begins to see opportunity where before it saw obstacles. Your morning self-talk is not just idle repetition. It is a conversation with the most influential person in your life, you. These words shape perception, and perception shapes action. Your choices throughout the day will reflect the beliefs you held at the very start. The power of the mind is subtle, yet it is relentless. A single negative thought can grow unchecked if left unattended, spiraling into a chain reaction of worry, hesitation, and doubt. Conversely, a single positive affirmation can act as a compass, guiding you back to focus, strength, and clarity. This is why the things you tell yourself in the quiet of the morning matter more than almost anything else. They are the foundation. They are the blueprint. They are the invisible hands that mold your experience. It is not just about repeating platitudes, saying, I am strong. Without understanding what strength means to you will have little effect. True morning self-talk requires intention. It requires reflection. When you speak to yourself, you must feel it. You must allow the words to resonate, to sink into the deepest parts of your mind where old patterns linger. It is in this space, often untouched and ignored, that transformation begins. If your mind is cluttered with regret, resentment, or fear, it will carry these feelings into the day. But if you deliberately feed it hope, determination, and clarity, it will radiate outward in every choice you make. The mind is not passive. It responds to what it perceives. When you tell yourself that today is going to be difficult, your mind will subconsciously begin to look for proof of difficulty. When you tell yourself that today is full of potential, your mind starts to notice doors that were previously invisible. The shift is subtle but profound. It is the difference between a day that feels heavy and draining and a day that feels purposeful and full of momentum. You cannot always control what happens, but you can control what your mind believes about what happens. Your morning mindset also dictates how you interact with the world. If you start with a sense of empowerment, you are more likely to respond to challenges rather than react. You are more likely to inspire those around you because energy is contagious. If you start with doubt, hesitation, or self-criticism, these emotions will leak into every conversation, every decision, every task. The mind's influence is not limited to internal experience, it manifests externally. People respond to the energy you carry. Opportunities are often a reflection of the confidence and clarity with which you approach them. Discipline is required to harness this power. The mind is conditioned to default to old patterns, to gravitate toward comfort, fear, or negativity. That is why a consistent morning routine of intentional self-talk is not optional if you want to shape your days effectively. It is the practice of reclaiming control over your inner narrative, of deciding what tone your day will take before the world begins to assert itself upon you. Every morning, you have a choice to wake up passively and let the day happen to you, or to rise actively and shape the day through the thoughts you cultivate. It may feel strange at first. Words spoken to yourself can feel hollow if your mind has been trained for self-criticism. But change begins with repetition. As you consistently remind yourself of your capabilities, your resilience, your clarity, and your worth, your mind begins to accept these truths. It begins to reject the lies of doubt. It begins to orient itself toward possibility instead of limitation. And gradually, what you speak in the quiet of the morning becomes what you experience in the light of day. Your mind is your most loyal companion, but it requires guidance. Like a garden, it will grow weeds if neglected, but it will flourish if nourished intentionally. Morning self-talk is the watering, the sunlight, the careful tending that allows the seeds of your potential to grow. It is the acknowledgement that you are not merely a passenger in your own life, but the driver. You cannot always control the traffic or the road conditions, but you can control your direction, your attention, your focus. And so, each morning, the first thoughts you choose to entertain are not trivial. They are not insignificant. They are the first brushstrokes on the canvas of your day. They define the tone, the texture, the color of your experience. They are a declaration to yourself and to the world that your life is not subject to circumstance alone, but guided by the strength, clarity, and intention of your mind. From the moment we begin to understand the world, a subtle message is often whispered into our minds. Your value is measured by how others perceive you. As children, we learn to seek nods of approval, smiles of affirmation, recognition for achievement, and applause for effort. These early lessons, while seemingly harmless, create a deep undercurrent in our psyche, the belief that our worth is external, that it must be earned, negotiated, or proven. This is a dangerous belief because it gives power over our lives to people, circumstances, and opinions that are inherently uncontrollable. Every day, the temptation to seek validation continues, a like on social media, a compliment at work, recognition in relationships. And yet, the more we chase approval, the further we drift from the quiet, unshakable knowledge of our own worth. To live a life anchored in self-worth is to stop measuring yourself by someone else's yardstick. It is to understand fundamentally that your value exists independently of praise, judgment, or acknowledgement. You do not need permission to exist. You do not need consent to pursue your goals. You do not need validation to speak your truth. When you internalize this, your life transforms, not because circumstances change, but because your perspective does. The mind, once trained to fluctuate with every external opinion, stabilizes. You no longer rise or fall on the tides of approval. You anchor yourself in the certainty of who you are. The practice of prioritizing self-worth over approval begins with awareness. You must first recognize the subtle ways in which you have allowed others to define your value. Perhaps you alter your choices to please someone, avoid conflict out of fear of judgment, or shrink your presence to be more acceptable. These patterns are often unconscious, but they are visible if you pay attention. Notice the anxiety that arises when someone criticizes you. Notice the relief that comes when you receive praise. These emotional reactions are indicators of where your worth has been outsourced. Awareness is the first step because you cannot reclaim your power if you do not see where it has been given away. Once you recognize this, the next step is deliberate affirmation of your inherent value. Self-worth is not built on perfection, achievements, or the accumulation of accolades. It is built on recognition of your existence as enough. Simply because you exist, tell yourself silently or aloud that you are complete without approval. Acknowledge your talents, your persistence, your courage, your capacity to endure. Celebrate your efforts, not for applause, but for the commitment you made to yourself. This is the shift from seeking confirmation from the world to giving it to yourself. When the internal affirmation becomes louder than the external, the chase for validation naturally fades. Living from self-worth over approval also changes the way you navigate relationships. You no longer tolerate manipulation, dishonesty, or disrespect in pursuit of acceptance. You no longer feel compelled to shrink your voice, dim your presence, or conform to someone else's expectations just to be liked. Your boundaries strengthen because you understand that approval is optional, but respect for yourself is essential. This does not mean you reject feedback, collaboration, or connection. It means you engage with the world from a place of strength rather than dependence. Your interactions are no longer transactional, based on the reward of recognition. They become authentic expressions of who you are, and the right people will resonate with that truth naturally. The pursuit of approval also consumes energy that could be better invested in growth, creativity, and purpose. When your focus shifts inward, you conserve your energy for meaningful endeavors rather than for pleasing others. You learn to prioritize what aligns with your values over what aligns with others' expectations. This is not arrogance, it is clarity. It is understanding that the time you have is finite, and each moment spent chasing validation is a moment stolen from your own evolution. Each decision made from the lens of self-worth is a step toward mastery of your own life, a declaration that your happiness and fulfillment are your responsibility first. One of the most subtle challenges in prioritizing self-worth over approval is the internal resistance that arises. The voice that questions, "What will they think?" or "Do I fit in?" is powerful because it has been cultivated for years. To quiet this voice, you must practice conscious self-dialogue. Each morning, before the noise of the world infiltrates your mind, remind yourself that your value does not need confirmation. Affirm that your existence is meaningful, that your contributions matter, and that your choices are worthy. Over time, this repetition rewires the subconscious, replacing dependency on external approval with confidence rooted in self-recognition. Self-worth over approval also cultivates resilience. When life delivers criticism, rejection, or misunderstanding, it no longer shakes the foundation of who you are. You experience feedback without internalizing it as a measure of your value. You accept perspective without surrendering your identity. Challenges become opportunities to reaffirm your strength rather than threats to your significance. By refusing to outsource your worth, you reclaim control over your emotional state, your decisions, and the trajectory of your life. Ultimately, the liberation of valuing yourself over the approval of others transforms not only your inner world, but your external reality. You radiate confidence, authenticity, and presence in ways that approval-seeking can never achieve. People are drawn to the energy of self-assurance, not because you demand their recognition, but because you embody a quiet, unshakable certainty. Your work, your relationships, your choices, and your presence reflect the truth that you are enough. No compliment is necessary to validate your existence. No nod from the outside can enhance the power that already resides within you, and no measure of acceptance can surpass the certainty of self-recognition. It is one thing to dream, to visualize, to speak affirmations, and to cultivate a mindset of possibility. But thoughts alone are not enough to create the life you desire. Momentum is not generated by intention, it is generated by action. Every step you take, no matter how small, begins to carry weight, to push forward the inertia of your circumstances, to create a ripple that grows into movement, and movement that eventually becomes momentum. Without action, even the clearest vision remains a ghost of potential, and the most inspiring affirmation fades into emptiness. Action is the bridge between thought and reality, between what is imagined and what is manifested. The first challenge is often overcoming the resistance to start. The mind, comfortable with repetition and predictability, prefers stagnation to uncertainty. It will fabricate excuses, inflate fears, and whisper reasons why waiting is better than acting. The truth is that the first action is always the hardest because it demands courage, the courage to leave the familiar, to confront uncertainty, to risk imperfection. Yet, it is in taking that initial step, however imperfect or small, that the machinery of momentum begins to turn. One choice, one move, one decision sets in motion forces that no amount of hesitation can replicate. Momentum is cumulative. It grows not from isolated efforts, but from consistent, deliberate action. The person who moves, even imperfectly, accumulates progress that compounds over time. Each completed task, each initiative taken, each moment of courage reinforces the habit of forward motion. Your mind, once dormant or hesitant, begins to recognize the pattern progress comes from doing. And once recognized, this pattern reinforces itself. Action becomes easier, faster, more intuitive. What once required monumental effort begins to feel natural. Momentum is the reward of repetition, of persistence, of refusing to wait for perfect conditions before taking the necessary steps. Action also transforms perception. When you act, you create feedback loops that provide clarity. You discover what works, what fails, and what requires adjustment. This learning cannot come from thought alone, it requires doing. Every misstep, every failure, every unexpected result is data, insight, and experience that propels you forward. Without action, you remain trapped in the theoretical, imagining outcomes instead of generating them. But with action, the world responds, and in that response, you find knowledge that accelerates your growth. Momentum is therefore not just speed, it is direction, understanding, and the capacity to refine your path. The relationship between action and motivation is often misunderstood. Many believe motivation must precede action, that energy must appear before effort. The truth is often the opposite. Action generates motivation. The simple act of beginning, of moving forward, triggers energy, enthusiasm, and confidence. It creates a sense of possibility that thought alone cannot evoke. Movement begets momentum, momentum begets clarity, and clarity begets motivation. This is the principle that separates those who remain stagnant from those who continually progress. Waiting for perfect readiness is the enemy of momentum. Starting, even imperfectly, is the catalyst. Momentum also reinforces belief in yourself. When you consistently act toward your goals, you gather evidence of capability. You prove to yourself day after day that you are competent, resilient, and able to affect change. This internal proof strengthens self-confidence and diminishes fear. The mind, which once hesitated in doubt, begins to trust your capacity to navigate challenges. Each small action accumulates into a larger narrative. You are someone who does, who persists, who follows through. Momentum is therefore both external and internal. It shapes the reality you experience and the self you become. Action transforms resistance into opportunity. The challenges, obstacles, and uncertainties that seem immovable when considered in thought alone become manageable when confronted with movement. Action forces problems into the open, demands solutions, and compels adaptation. The energy required to act often dissolves inertia, anxiety, and self-doubt, revealing clarity and focus that were previously obscured. Momentum, once initiated, carries you through resistance, turning friction into fuel and hesitation into motion. Each step forward, no matter how small, builds confidence and expands your capacity to take the next. Another subtle effect of action is its influence on time. Inaction magnifies the perception of time as endless, as a series of opportunities to postpone effort. Action compresses time, accelerates results, and creates visible progress. When you move, even incrementally, your days accumulate purpose and direction. Hours are no longer lost to indecision. They are transformed into milestones, momentum, and forward motion. Life responds to action. Opportunities appear in response to effort. Doors open because you approach them. And momentum attracts resources, ideas, and people that amplify your results. Action requires courage, but courage grows through action itself. The more you move, the more confident you become. The more you act, the more the mind begins to recognize that obstacles are not permanent, that fear is a signal to engage rather than retreat, and that effort generates results that waiting cannot. Momentum is a force that compounds over time. The first act is the spark, the second act feeds the fire, and the third creates a blaze that propels you forward in ways thought impossible when you stood still. Consistency is the cornerstone. Momentum cannot be sustained by sporadic bursts. It requires persistent action. Even when results are unseen, even when progress feels invisible, every deliberate step contributes to the larger force of motion. It is the repeated commitment to act, to move, to persist that transforms potential into reality. Action brings momentum because it refuses to allow fear, hesitation, or doubt to dominate. It asserts control over the narrative of your life and commands the world to respond. There is a quiet power that exists in noticing, in acknowledging, in appreciating the moments, people, and circumstances in your life. It is easy to overlook this power, to rush through life fixated on what is missing, what is wrong, what has gone awry. Yet, resilience, the ability to withstand adversity, to recover from setbacks, to keep moving forward despite difficulty, finds its roots in gratitude. Gratitude is not simply a nod to fortune or a superficial acknowledgement of good things. It is a deep, deliberate recognition that life, even in its chaos and pain, has value, has lessons, has gifts that must be noticed. When you cultivate this awareness, you build an inner reservoir of strength that no circumstance can fully deplete. Gratitude shifts perspective. Life presents challenges indiscriminately, and the mind is naturally drawn to notice losses, failures, and hardships more vividly than victories or blessings. This is a survival mechanism, an evolutionary bias that keeps us alert to danger, but it can also imprison us in negativity if left unchecked. Gratitude acts as a corrective lens, helping the mind focus not solely on what is lacking but on what is present. When you begin the day by consciously acknowledging aspects of your life that are already working, that are already valuable, you reorient your attention. You recognize the resources at your disposal, the skills you have honed, the people who support you, the small victories that have gone unnoticed. This awareness builds resilience because it reminds you that no matter what unfolds, you have a foundation to rely upon, a base from which to act and recover. Resilience is often misunderstood as stoicism or invulnerability. It is not the absence of struggle, nor is it pretending that difficulty does not exist. True resilience is the capacity to engage with life fully, to feel the pain, and yet to continue moving forward with clarity and purpose. Gratitude nurtures this capacity by highlighting the threads of stability, hope, and meaning even in the midst of chaos. When you consciously recognize what is good, you cultivate an internal compass that points toward possibility rather than despair. This does not remove obstacles, but it provides the mental strength to face them, to endure them, and to act in ways that preserve your energy rather than deplete it. The act of gratitude is also deeply grounding. In moments of stress, fear, or uncertainty, the mind can become scattered, imagining worst-case scenarios or obsessing over what has been lost. Gratitude pulls your attention back to the present, anchoring you in the tangible reality of what exists rather than the hypothetical fears of what might. By focusing on the people who care, the skills you have developed, the experiences that have shaped you, you create a sense of stability. You remind yourself that life is not entirely chaos and that even when circumstances are difficult, there are constants to rely upon. This grounding effect reduces anxiety and strengthens your resolve to persevere. Gratitude also builds resilience through the lens of meaning. When you encounter adversity, it is easy to perceive it as unfair or meaningless. Yet by acknowledging the lessons, the growth, and even the hidden benefits that challenges bring, you transform difficulty into opportunity. This is not a call to minimize pain, but to reframe it. Each struggle contains insight, each obstacle carries a message, each failure offers knowledge that cannot be obtained otherwise. Gratitude sharpens your ability to notice these insights, to extract value from experience, and to convert difficulty into a stepping stone rather than a barrier. Over time, this practice strengthens your resilience because you begin to expect that life, even in its trials, provides tools for your development. Resilience built through gratitude also impacts relationships and community. When you recognize and appreciate the support, kindness, and loyalty of those around you, you foster stronger connections. These relationships, in turn, serve as buffers during times of stress. Gratitude reminds you that you are not navigating life alone, that help exists when you ask for it, and that collaboration is a resource rather than a concession. This acknowledgement reduces isolation, reinforces emotional endurance, and expands the capacity to confront challenges with the assurance that support is present. It is impossible to overestimate how much inner strength is derived from knowing you are connected and valued, and gratitude is the lens through which this truth becomes visible. Daily practice of gratitude transforms the mind itself. By deliberately taking note of what is positive, even amidst difficulty, you train your brain to recognize opportunity, abundance, and potential. The mind begins to expect resilience rather than helplessness, action rather than passivity, and growth rather than stagnation. Gratitude becomes not a reaction but a habit, a default stance that shapes how you interpret events. Small acknowledgements of what is good create neural pathways that reinforce hope, determination, and perseverance. Over time, these pathways accumulate into a powerful network that equips you to face the inevitable challenges of life with stability and courage. Gratitude fuels resilience because it fosters patience, perspective, and purpose. When you recognize the small victories and hidden gifts in every day, you slow down the relentless pace of expectation and disappointment. You learn to tolerate discomfort without being overwhelmed by it. You begin to see that setbacks are temporary and that effort invested today will bear fruit tomorrow. Gratitude reminds you that life is not measured solely by the absence of struggle, but by the capacity to engage with it meaningfully, to persist, and to grow in the face of difficulty. It is both shield and compass, grounding you in reality while guiding you forward. In essence, resilience is not simply the ability to survive, it is the ability to thrive through awareness, acknowledgement, and appreciation. Gratitude fuels this ability by reminding you of what endures, what is valuable, and what is within your control. It transforms the mind from a reactive instrument into a proactive force, capable of navigating uncertainty with courage, clarity, and confidence. The daily practice of noticing, naming, and appreciating what is present builds an internal strength that cannot be taken away, a quiet power that persists even when circumstances are harsh, and a capacity to continue moving forward with purpose even when the world seems determined to test your limits. Fear is one of the most powerful forces you will ever encounter, and yet it is one of the most misunderstood. It is not simply a signal of danger or a protective instinct. Fear is often a lens through which the mind interprets the unknown. It exaggerates risks, magnifies doubts, and convinces you that comfort is safety while growth is danger. Fear is not neutral. It is a force that can paralyze, restrain, and shape the trajectory of your life if left unchecked. The first step in choosing possibility over fear is recognizing that fear is inevitable. It will appear in moments of opportunity, in moments of change, in moments where you are called to stretch beyond what is familiar. It is a natural part of life, but it does not have to be the dictator of your decisions. Every opportunity you encounter carries some element of uncertainty, and where uncertainty exists, fear often follows. It whispers that failure is imminent, that you are unprepared, or that the consequences are too great. These whispers can feel convincing because they are rooted in instinct, in the mind's desire for preservation. Yet, what fear obscures is the truth that possibility exists alongside it. Growth, achievement, fulfillment, and progress all exist in the space that fear tries to dominate. To prioritize possibility over fear is to consciously acknowledge the presence of fear while refusing to allow it to control your actions. It is to see not only the risk, but the potential reward, and to make a choice that aligns with courage rather than avoidance. Fear thrives in the imagination. It is fueled by projections of what could go wrong, often with little evidence that these projections will come to pass. Possibility, on the other hand, is rooted in reality tempered by hope. It considers what can be achieved, what can be created, what can be experienced if you step forward despite the uncertainty. The mind has the power to dwell on either. When you practice choosing possibility over fear, you retrain your mind to seek opportunity rather than danger, to look for solutions rather than obstacles, to focus on potential rather than limitation. This shift does not erase fear, but it redefines its influence. Fear becomes a signal, not a command, a challenge to navigate rather than a barrier to surrender to. One of the most subtle ways fear manifests is through indecision. You may find yourself hesitating, overanalyzing, waiting for the perfect moment, or seeking assurance that may never arrive. This hesitation is fear in disguise, a disguised attempt to maintain safety and avoid discomfort. Yet, every moment spent waiting is a moment where possibility is deferred, where opportunity passes by unnoticed. Action is the antidote. By moving forward despite fear, by taking even the smallest steps toward your goal, you begin to reclaim power from the very thing that tried to hold you back. Momentum builds as action reinforces courage, and courage, in turn, expands the sense of what is possible. Fear also thrives on comparison and expectation. When you measure yourself against the imagined achievements of others or against impossible standards, fear magnifies and possibility shrinks. To prioritize possibility over fear is to return your attention to what you can create, to what you can influence, and to what you can experience. It is to focus on your path, your abilities, and your opportunities rather than the judgments, expectations, or achievements of others. Possibility is expansive because it is self-directed, fueled by imagination, vision, and courage. Fear is constricting because it demands compliance, inhibition, and avoidance. Choosing possibility is an act of liberation from the confines that fear imposes. The practice of embracing possibility over fear requires deliberate internal dialogue. Each morning, each decision, each moment where hesitation appears must be met with acknowledgement and redirection. Speak to yourself with clarity. I see the fear, but I will act anyway. I recognize the risk, but I am capable of navigating it. I feel doubt, but I choose opportunity over limitation. These statements are not magic, they are training. They gradually rewire the mind to recognize that fear is informative, not directive, and that possibility exists as long as you choose to see it. Over time, this practice strengthens the mental muscle required to step into the unknown with confidence, resilience, and focus. Fear often magnifies the unknown, while possibility illuminates it. When you step forward with courage, you discover capacities within yourself that fear never allowed you to see. You discover resourcefulness, creativity, endurance, and strength that emerge only when you take action despite uncertainty. The unknown transforms from a place of threat into a landscape of potential. Each experience where you prioritize possibility over fear reinforces a neural pathway in your mind, a reminder that you are capable, adaptable, and courageous. Possibility becomes not just a choice but a habit and orientation, a default stance from which you approach every challenge, opportunity, and decision. Choosing possibility over fear is also an act of reclaiming time. Fear causes delay, hesitation, and inaction, and in doing so, it robs you of experiences, growth, and progress. Possibility insists that the moment is now, that action is available, that the future is shaped by the choices you make today. Life does not wait for perfection, certainty, or comfort. It unfolds regardless of readiness. Those who step forward despite fear claim their place in the unfolding of life. They discover opportunities that inaction would have denied them, and they cultivate a resilience that fear alone could never provide. Ultimately, the decision to choose possibility over fear is a decision about power. It is the understanding that fear may appear, but it does not define your limits. It is the acknowledgement that every challenge carries opportunity, that every risk carries reward, and that every moment carries the potential to transform your path if you refuse to be paralyzed by doubt. Possibility exists as long as you act, as long as you refuse to surrender to the narratives of limitation, as long as you trust your capacity to navigate uncertainty. Transformation is often imagined as a sudden event, a dramatic breakthrough, or a moment of inspiration that changes everything instantly. Movies, books, and stories reinforce this illusion, showing characters experiencing overnight success, miraculous insights, or instant shifts that seem effortless. But real transformation is rarely sudden. True change is built quietly, deliberately and persistently through repeated actions, habits, and choices over time. Consistency is the invisible architect of growth, the steady hand that shapes progress when inspiration alone is fleeting, and the force that converts intention into reality. Without it, even the clearest vision remains unrealized, and even the strongest desire fades into fleeting aspiration. Consistency begins with small, deliberate steps. Every day, every moment, presents an opportunity to act in alignment with your goals, values, and intentions. These actions may seem insignificant individually, a word written, a task completed, a decision made, but their power compounds over time. The mind, body, and spirit respond to repetition. Skills improve, habits solidify, confidence strengthens, and understanding deepens. Each consistent effort reinforces the previous one, creating a chain of progress that becomes unbreakable when nurtured with patience and discipline. Transformation does not demand perfection, it demands persistence. One of the most overlooked aspects of consistency is its role in shaping identity. When you repeatedly act in alignment with your values, you begin to internalize those actions as part of who you are. The person who chooses courage daily becomes courageous. The person who chooses discipline daily becomes disciplined. The person who chooses kindness daily becomes kind. Transformation, therefore, is not simply a matter of changing circumstances, it is a matter of evolving the self. Every repeated action is a vote for the person you wish to become, and consistency ensures that these votes accumulate until the change is undeniable, tangible, and permanent. Consistency also strengthens resilience. Change is rarely linear. Obstacles, setbacks, and failures are inevitable, and without persistence, even the strongest intentions can falter. Consistency allows you to navigate these challenges with stability. When you commit to daily progress, setbacks become temporary, not defining. Missed opportunities, mistakes, or delays do not erase the work that has already been done. Each day of consistent action reaffirms commitment, reinforces capability, and rebuilds momentum. Transformation is therefore inseparable from persistence, because it is only through enduring effort that growth becomes permanent, and only through sustained practice that resilience is cultivated. The power of consistency is also psychological. The mind begins to expect action, progress, and results when repeated efforts are made. Habits form, decision-making becomes easier, and motivation grows from action rather than hope alone. This is why consistency is more important than intensity. A single day of extraordinary effort cannot match the cumulative effect of small, steady steps taken over months or years. Transformation does not require heroics. It requires faithfulness to the process, commitment to repetition, and trust in the compounding effect of deliberate effort. Consistency builds credibility, not just in the eyes of others, but in your own eyes. When you show up for yourself day after day, You prove your reliability, your discipline, and your ability to follow through. This internal trust becomes a foundation for greater confidence, decision-making, and ambition. Transformation is not only external, it is internal. The more you trust your capacity to commit, the more empowered you become to pursue larger goals, take calculated risks, and embrace change. Consistency reinforces the narrative that you are capable, steadfast, and reliable, and this narrative becomes the framework upon which transformation is constructed. Another subtle yet profound effect of consistency is its ability to turn ordinary actions into extraordinary results. Few recognize the exponential power of repeated effort. A single workout, a single practice session, a single act of focus or discipline may seem trivial, but repeated over weeks, months, and years, it compounds into mastery, strength, and achievement that appears miraculous to outsiders. Transformation is rarely the result of sudden brilliance. It is the sum of countless small efforts applied over time. Consistency is the multiplier, the silent force that converts intention into accomplishment. Consistency also requires patience and self-compassion. Progress is often invisible in the short term. Change does not announce itself loudly, it grows quietly, subtly reshaping habits, mindset, and capability until the difference becomes undeniable. Those who abandon their practice when immediate results are absent fail to recognize the slow, deliberate work that is taking place beneath the surface. Transformation is cumulative, and every consistent effort, no matter how small, is a deposit into the bank of your future self. Patience allows the process to unfold, and self-compassion allows you to persist without judgment when the journey feels long or difficult. Consistency, in its essence, is the art of repetition with intention. It is not mindless persistence, but purposeful engagement. It is choosing actions that align with your goals day after day, knowing that the path to transformation is not a straight line, but a series of deliberate steps that accumulate into profound change. It teaches discipline, builds resilience, strengthens identity, and compounds effort into mastery. Transformation is not magic, it is methodical. It is the product of showing up repeatedly, refining your practice, learning from failure, and trusting the process. Through consistency, life becomes predictable not in outcome, but in progress. You know that if you continue to act, continue to practice, continue to show up, change is inevitable. The seeds you plant through repeated effort will eventually bear fruit. Momentum builds naturally, confidence grows organically, and your vision slowly but surely becomes reality. Transformation, when built through consistency, is permanent because it is not forced, it is grown. It is nurtured, cultivated, and reinforced through daily commitment, patience, and faith in the compounding power of action